The last game of the week was actually the next friendly just a few days later, which was the U.S. Women's national team taking on Nigeria. This game to me was a lot more interesting. It was also a bit more dicey. I know that the U.S., when they play against teams, have a tendency to, I guess, a lot happens. A lot of butting heads happens, a lot of tackles happens, a lot of fouls happen, a lot of players pick up knocks. And this game was no exception to that. There were a lot of players on the floor, cleats being stomped on and whatnot. It was really interesting, but overall the game ended in a score of 2-0. The 2 goals came from the honorable Christen press, which came in extra time or added time in the 47th minute, just before the half ensued. She received the ball from Carly Lloyd and then off the bounce scored with her weak left foot on the left side of net. So I thought it was a pretty nice goal. And then Lynn Williams capped off the win by receiving a ball from Christen press. Again, in stoppage in the 94th minute, she takes an extra touch, glides past the keeper, and slots it home, giving the U.S. their second goal and sealing the win. So this game was a lot more interesting, a lot more close. If I had to say where this lies in terms of the other games this week, I would say it was probably somewhere in the middle, the Jamaica game being the most boring and the most dominant, and the Portugal game being the most competitive and the closest. This game is right directly in the middle. It was a ton of fun, I thought, to watch, and it was really interesting seeing Nigeria play really well. And it's really strange that I say that they played really well because the U.S. held the ball for like 72% of the game. They had a ton of shots. Nigeria only had I think 1 shot on goal. And I still think Nigeria actually, in a way, held their own by and large, and they defended well. So really interesting seeing how standards change between team to team. But anyways, what was the lineup for this game? So we had Alyssa Nair starting in goal. We had Kelly O'Hara in the right back position. We had Abby Delkemper and Becky Sarber partnering alongside each other in central defense. Then in left back, we had the honorable Crystal Dunn. In central midfield, we had Sam Mewis and Christy Mewis with Lindsay Horan playing in that 6th spot once again. And then in the forward line, we had Christen Press, Carly Lloyd, and Megan Rapinoe. The subs that Coach Vlatko Andonovski made, again, he made all 6 of them this game, which makes a ton of sense. Lynn Williams, Katarina Macario, Tina Davidson, Alex Morgan, and Emily Sonnet. So I guess I stand corrected. He only made 5. But if I'm mistaken on that, guys, feel free to correct me down in the comments. But one of the most interesting things I found between the lineup and the subs was Emily Sonnet, when she was subbed on into the game, she was subbed on in order to play that 6th spot. She played in the center defensive midfield position. And this is going to sound weird, but I actually thought she didn't do too bad in that role. Other than her getting a yellow card in the game, I thought that she actually held down that spot and was a little bit more natural for her, which I'm like, it was just interesting seeing a natural defender play in that spot. And then on the flip side of the coin, it was interesting, again, seeing Lindsay Horan, who's more of an attack-minded player, playing in a defensive spot. So Coach Vlatko's really mixing it up a little bit, and I'm excited to see if Julie Ertz can't play in the Olympics, who will play in that spot. My guess is Lindsay Horan, but could Emily Sonnet come off the bench and play in that spot? I guess time will tell. So really interesting sub, I thought, overall in that regard. Some stats for this game. Like I said earlier, the U.S. pretty much dominated this game with 72% possession. They completed 83% of their passes in this game, so they're completing almost all of their passes, which is nuts. And I guess in the world of pass completion, I guess you'd get to your elite pass completions when you're at 90% and above. And then your really awesome pass completion percentages are probably between 80 and 90%. Then again, I really have no metric to compare that against to, so take that for what it's worth. That's just how I see it. The U.S. actually had the fewest amount of shots on goal in this game. They had 14 shots, with 6 of them being on goal. Again, they took advantage of their chances this game and managed to get 2 goals. But I thought it was interesting that, again, they had fewer chances, but they made the most of them. And one thing I really thought was the U.S. in all 3 of these games for the summer series, they seemed a lot more patient and methodical in their buildup. It was very rare to see them just quickly hoof the ball upfield and get a goal right away. A lot of it was slowly playing up over time, and that actually might explain why they had so much possession and why they complete so many of their passes, is because of the fact that they're a lot more patient than they were to start off the year. I remember at the starting off the year of 2021, they would throw in a lot of long balls, and it wouldn't always land quite right, and they would take really risky passes. Now it's really high percentage passes, slowly methodically building upfield. I mean, granted, there are exceptions to this rule, like Christen Press's balls. 2 of the assists she had were from long balls from across field, which, if it works by all means, but I would say that those would be the exception, not the rule in this case. So what are some other overall thoughts I had for this week in general? I'll just go with the entire week. The U.S. kept clean sheets all week. They only held opponents to 2 shots on goal all week. I think they had 1 against Portugal and they had 1 against Nigeria, which, wow, it's unbelievable the fact that they just hold opponents to not only almost never having the ball, but never even really getting a shot off. And just, they never, this week, they never let their opponents have more than 35% possession. The team that had that possession percentage was Portugal. And it seems to be pretty par for the course for them this year. They rarely let their opponents get a chance at goal. They have outscored their opponents now by a lot. It's got to be 70-4, I think it is, if my math isn't off. So, which it very well could be since the last time I checked it. But really interesting that the U.S. defensively has just utterly dominated it. It's very eye-opening to see just how good they are and why their back line is so solidified as well. And I want to say another thing I felt too this week was despite the U.S. having the ball the majority of the time, I think 2 out of the 3 of the games felt a lot closer than what they appeared to be. I'm mainly referring to the Portugal and Nigeria game. When you're a fan watching these games, it's like the U.S. always had the ball, but it's like they never felt like they were dominating in either of those games. Like it always felt like Nigeria and Portugal put in a shift and hung in there the entire time. Did I think Portugal and Nigeria had a chance to win either game? Not particularly, no, but I think that a draw was in the cards against Portugal especially, and it was really weird having that feeling, just the feeling of having the game feel a lot closer than what it might have been on the field. So some food for thought there. I don't know if it has something to do with Julie Ertz being that really big presence in the midfield and just bossing everybody. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. And actually, with Julie Ertz being gone in these last few games, I'm surprised that the U.S. didn't feel her presence or her absence a lot more this week without her. Because, I mean, the reality of it is, no matter how you slice it, to me, Julie Ertz is a top 10 player in the world. And anytime you lose a top 10 player in the world, it's going to affect your team, at least in some way. And especially so in Julie Ertz's case, because nobody does what Julie Ertz does. She plays in that central midfield role. She's a stunning header of the ball on set pieces. She wins every midfield battle. She wins most aerial battles, and she has some bone-crunching tackles and clearances in defense. Nobody does those combinations of things like Julie Ertz, and especially for such a team as good as the U.S., she, I think, is the most valuable player of all in the team. So, but then again, like I've said before, and I'll say it again, great teams cope with great loss, and the U.S. have continued to do that throughout this week, even with Julia Ertz gone, so good on them for that. Another thing I noticed that Christen continues to dominate. She won Woman of the Match all 3 matches this week, and I would say rightfully so. She scored 2 goals, had 3 assists, meaning that she was involved in 5 of the 7 U.S. goals this week, and that is no small feat whatsoever. That is a lot of goal involvement. If my math is right, that's about 86% of goals Christen Press was involved in, and you could make an argument that she won the PK for Lindsey Horan in the game against Jamaica, so that could be another check mark in that regard. But one thing I actually want to clarify too while I'm on that subject, I looked this up before I started the podcast because I actually did not know the answer to this myself. If a player wins a penalty, so in this case, Christen Press won the penalty for the U.S. against Jamaica, and Lindsey Horan scored it. Christen Press isn't credited with the assist in that regard. I don't know if any of you knew that or if I should have known that as a footballing fan, but I guess it's never crossed my mind before, so in case any of you didn't know that, I just wanted to bring it up here just in case it helps. So I hope that helps, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so another point that I noticed, and I think this will be my last point for the week, the front line, I think, struggled a little bit with the U.S., especially in the game against Portugal. It would seem that the U.S. had like a couple of sitting opportunities in front of goal, and they shot wide. They didn't make the most of their chances. It felt like they were a slight bit wasteful in the front line, at least for 2 out of the 3 games, that being the Portugal and the Nigeria game. It's like they weren't really quite clicking on all cylinders all the time. And like I said a little bit earlier on this episode, it's like I can't expect perfection every time, and great teams can cope with not performing as well. The best teams in the world still find a way to win despite their struggles. But when I was writing this point down in my notes for the episode, I still think that they struggled, but it's really hard for me to say that because of the fact that they scored 7 goals in 3 games. Like, that's, by and large, when you're looking at it from a normal standpoint, that's pretty great. When you're scoring 2 1/3 goals per game, like that usually isn't the sign of a struggling forward line. But in this case, I have to say it seemed that the forward line struggled at least a little bit in 2 out of 3 of these games. And I don't know if it was for the reasons that club play is going on right now, and they've got to go from club play to international, back to club play, back to international, and that wears on players after a while, because we did just come off of a year where they didn't have to play nearly as much. So it can be the mental toughness that goes into that is unprecedented too. So maybe I'm being a little bit harsh in that area, but that's just what I've pretty much observed throughout the week as well. So ladies and gentlemen, now with the summer series being up and over, what did you make of all the games? Did you enjoy them? Did any of you get to go to the games? Whatever you think, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts.